I'll start the recording.
Okay.
I'll start the recording.
Okay. Okay, well, we're ready to go, Bill. Do you want to do the roll call?
I will, thank you. Before we call the meeting to order, then we'll make sure we have everyone. We have Deputy Mayor Scott Gibb.
Present.
Williamson, I can see.
Present.
Councillor Port, I can see, and we have
Present.
Councillor Lotion.
Yeah, here.
So we have a quorum of councils, full council. So I'll call the meeting to order. I have at 1:01. Anyone have any additions to our agenda? Hearing none, call for confirmation of agenda then please. And we need a mover and a seconder to confirm our,
Also move.
seconded by Mark.
Second.
Sorry, we got Mark in there for seconder. I'll have to call a roll call for all votes, I'm afraid, because I can't see everybody on my screen. So I'll call for the motion. All in favor, Scott,
Yay.
Pat,
Yay.
Mark,
Yay.
Larry,
Yay.
Bill is yay. Motion's carried. Item 4, ask for any declarations of pecuniary interest or the general nature thereof. Seeing nor hearing none, it will be duly recorded. 5, presentations and delegations, 5.1. There's a presentation from Baker Tilly. Dwayne Potter, our audit manager, is with us, I hope. Read the 2019 financial statements. Are you there somewhere, Dwayne?
Unfortunately, Dwayne is not here. It is Richard Stegenga, the audit partner. So you get the older and less improved person of the two. So
That might be even better, Richard. I'm so glad you your voice. Thank you so much for being with us these crazy times.
all right, yes,
Can I turn this over to you?
sure, yes. Thank you very much, Mayor. Yes, these Zoom meetings are becoming rather common. Very different, but I will try to run through the presentation in an efficient and quick manner, because of course the township is still sitting in a good position, so don't really have that much to say, but I'll try to, as I said, move through it quickly. So first off, we'll start with the independent auditor's report. That is our report on the financial statements, and the auditor's report, the content has remained the same from the prior year. 2018, there were a lot of changes to the audit report. And I believe it's just the next slide down, Kate. Yeah. And there, so and the auditor's report, so therefore the important paragraph is that in our opinion, the accompanying consolidated financial statements present fairly in all material respects the financial position of the township at December 31st, 2019, and the results of its operations and cash flows for the year then ended in accordance with Canadian public sector accounting standards, or more commonly referred to as PSAB. So these are different standards for public agencies and governments. And that is your standard clean, unqualified auditor's report that you've seen in the past. So that clears off the auditor's report. Next, on the next slide, we will see just provides a summary of some of the audit procedures we do, just to give you an idea of things we look at. And of course, for the year-end audit this year, all of this Information was gathered remotely as it all happened after the state of emergency. So still with electronic means, we were able to gather the information we needed. So that highlights some of the things we do there. Next, we go to the an overview of where things are at. Matters of communication on the next slide. So the audit is complete pending council approval of the financial statements and receipt of the signed representation letter. The other matter there of the awaiting the legal response. Since this was produced, we have received a response from your lawyer, so that one is now off the list. There were no significant difficulties encountered during the audit or in the course of our audit procedures. No change to our plans or disagreements or difficulties with management. Excellent cooperation from your staff, and as well too, there is a new note in the financial statements just discussing the impacts of COVID-19 and the uncertainty that it provides moving forward. And since we are responsible to the audit report date, which will either be today or in a few days when we gather all the information, then that is required disclosure in the financial statements. The uncorrected misstatements, there were none, so that was good. Next, we go to the schedule of statement of financial position and the net financial assets. So these are assets that are either cash or will be turned into cash. Overall, you can see your cash balances did increase year over year, and that's mainly due to some timing and the fact you received the modernization funding. So that those monies have been received and not yet utilized as well. You had some gas tax money for about 590,000 that came in that wasn't spent yet. So those are some of the major items increasing that. You still have some money invested with the one fund investment. You still have some receivables, mainly HST. And the one thing there too is your taxes receivable. They still remain relatively low and within the low risk range. And your percentage actually went down as a percentage of your total levy. So that's good to see. And as well too, you had some change in your finance department over the year, and historically taxes receivable do have a tendency to suffer when there are changes, but it was nice to see that yours were able to decrease. So it was a good job there by your staff. And then the next slide just provides a pictorial view of our chart of that. Following slide shows who you owe money to. And majority of that is in your trade accounts payable, and you had a rather large payable to one of your contractors for some road work that created about a $500,000 increase there. And as well too, you owed the county and school some more funds for
I just lost Richard.
Hello?
Richard, are you still there?
I am. I can still hear you. Apparently, you lucked out and you can't hear me.
No, you went off to cyberspace somewhere. You're
Oh,
back.
okay.
Or
Oh,
You're
okay.
moving
Well,
and talking, breathing.
That does happen on occasion. So those are your financial liabilities. And then a pictorial view of that, and then you have your non-financial assets. So these are assets that you hold and own and do not normally turn into cash. And you can see there your tangible capital assets are your major one, and they decreased slightly year over year because your amortization was higher. And as well too, you have some inventories and other prepaid items there. So leaving you a net balance of accumulated surplus of almost $56 million. Next slide is just a quick summary of your consolidated statement of operations. So this then shows budget to actual and prior year. And what it does do is provide a reconciliation between the numbers presented and the reconciliation back to zero balances for both your budget, as you're supposed to budget to be a break even, no surplus or deficit, whereas the reconciliation then shows you the difference between tax rate budgeting and PSAB budget and what items are different there. So, and as well too, you can see that for the actuals and the fact that there was just some change in surpluses and changes in unfinanced capital outlay as well. So next we show a graph just of your net book value to your accumulated surplus. And as you can see there, you're at a spot where you want to be, with the orange bar higher than the blue bar. So that's a good sign of financial health. Next you see your revenues and expenses and annual surplus. And normally your revenues and expenses are fairly close together, except in years where you do receive a lot of capital funding. Then normally the revenues are higher, and then they get adjusted later on when you depreciate the assets. So quick summary there of your revenues. Budget to actual, overall the revenues were higher than budgeted and higher than the prior year. A couple things to highlight there. Within the federal and provincial grants, you also have the modernization funding in there of a little over 600,000, which was not budgeted. So that's been recorded in there. One of the main differences is for your variance from total. As well too, you also had some donations within the Shelter of Hope, which is also, or the animal shelter, that a $50,000 donation causing an increase there. You still collect water capital charges. You use development charges this year for the fire truck, and as well too, you use the federal gas tax on your road construction, and did lose some money just on a tangible capital asset loss of disposing of some previously recorded roads. So, but it's still just over $12 million in revenue. Next, you just see the pie chart of that information. Next, you will see the expenses, fairly consistent. Not a whole lot to highlight there. Very good budgeting, both within the transportation overall and within the transportation services. So then just slightly under budget, and just a few things there within the fire and the animal shelter being a little under budget as well. So that's explains most of the difference there. And when you look at rec and cultural services, it does include parks and recs and your library as well. And then next you have the pie chart showing that, and you, like most places, spend a significant portion on maintaining and looking after your road system. Next slide just shows your type of expenses in a slightly different format than how they were shown in the past. And as well too, these numbers is also very close to budget, so reflective of the overall close to budget on your expenses. So living within the amounts set out. Then a similar graph on the following page, and then next we come to the slide on accumulated surplus, and really this shows your composition of your $56 million accumulated surplus, and you'll see there that of that amount, you have about $5.5 million set aside in reserve and reserve funds, which are funds you can utilize moving forward. And the main increase there was setting aside the modernization funding in there of about 600,000, whereas using some amounts throughout the year for some capital work. And then when you look at the top part, you will see you do have a township surplus kind of in the middle of the page at the end of the year of 315,000, up slightly from 314,000. So those are funds that you have available that you can use moving forward. And I believe the intention there was to utilize those for some additional costs or lost revenue you may have in 2020 due to the current situation. And the one thing to highlight too there is the waterworks operations did incur a deficit this year, going from 156 to 279. Just so you're aware that that user pay system is still sitting now an accumulated deficit of about 280,000. Just so wanted to make you aware of that. Next, you will see a 5-year comparison on your reserve and reserve funds. Remained fairly consistent over the years in total. Next slide just shows you where you spent your capital additions this year. There were about $2.8 million. This year you did acquire a number of items in the vehicles and equipment area, being a fire truck, a loader, a plow, a Zamboni, and some other smaller vehicles. And as well too, you spent almost $1.2 million on roads work for various number of roads, and as well like things such as Cornish Hollow and Ford Street and Sunset Drive and Page Court roads such as that. So those amounts have been set up and capitalized. And the next slide shows you your tangible capital assets versus your amortization. And you can see there in 2018, you had more additions than amortization. And this year, it reverted back to the amounts in 2016 and 2017, being more amortization than additions. And then your useful life of your tangible capital assets is the next graph. So the green areas are the amounts that are not amortized yet. And you will see there that township as well as other municipalities that have water or sewer systems, the biggest green line is normally within those water and sewer areas. So because of the required improvements that were needed over the years. And then the following table just shows you your net financial asset trend over the last 5 years. And for you still remain in the black. So that's, you have net financial assets. I mean, if you were below the line, the bars do turn red, so you're still in the black on that side. So that's always a good thing to see. And then that's a summary of where you are as the township itself. And then the remaining slides are just some comparative analysis that some municipalities have asked us to put together. So we've just provided a bit of a comparison to those municipalities listed there. So what you may get out of this is a flavor of certain things in comparison. You can't draw any definite conclusions because you don't know the underlying basis for the numbers, but just provide you a bit of information to take a quick peek at. So the first bar in blue is always the 2019 township information, and then all the remaining bars are the 2018 comparative information for both the township and the others, because of course the 2019 information for FIRs for most of your comparators is not yet posted to the site. So overall, you have your comparison of your taxation for those selected comparators. And then you go to your net debt to the net book value of your assets, and since you don't have any long-term debt, scoring 0 here is good. taxes receivable to your total taxes levy. You can see here you're still continue to do a fine job of that, and you're well below the 10% line, which is the low risk range according to the Ministry of Municipal Affairs. So you're continuing to do well there. Taxation and user charges on a per household basis up slightly, and still very comparable with the ones listed there. Your PSAB expenses on a per household basis, slight increase there as well, but still consistent across the way. Your debt, since you have no debt, that still remains in a good position. Your reserve and your reserve funds to your municipal expenses increased slightly year over year, and you can see there how different municipalities choose to fund and how to approach reserves. Some may have a lot of reserves as well as having a lot of debt, so there's a bit of a trade-off there in how you intend on financing your capital additions. And then the final two slides are just some information on salaries and benefits on a per household basis, and then compared to total expenses there. So fairly consistent year over year. So as I said, that just take a look at that and just to get a flavor of some comparisons. So, and that is all I wish to say, and to thank your staff for the work they did. As I said, we did have a number of changes within the finance department, and as well, and doing the year-end audit remotely did, although may have taken a little longer, it didn't create as any difficulties, and we'd like to thank your staff for assisting us with that. And you still remain in a good financial position.
Thank you very much, Richard, for that. And while you're giving the thank yous, I echo that. Nuzrit and their financial staff, we're very proud of what you're able to do for us. I'm going to open this up now, see if any members of council would have any questions for the from the presentation.
I have a question, Bill.
Go ahead.
Richard Scott Jib here. I'm going to reference to page 12 of your report, 12 of 36. It's entitled Total Revenues, Expenses, and Annual Surpluses. And my question is dealing with the total revenues and expenses. I just wanted to confirm that I'm interpreting that correctly, that even though we're in as good a financial position as we are in this municipality, we are in fact in the last 4 years spending more than we are getting in the front door from 2016 on. Is that correct?
That is correct, but you must keep in mind too that within the orange bars of the expenses, it does include amortization. So part of that that's different in a PSAB world than how you would budget. I'm just trying to grab, just give me one. So a lot of that is just reflective of the fact that you had a lot of capital and additions maybe a little earlier perhaps than most, and therefore they were all added, let's say, prior to 2015, and now they're being depreciated. As I know the work you did at the Baltimore Arena and the Bewdley Arena and things such as that were done a number of years ago. So that could be a reason why that it is showing up like that. If you just, I'm just running a report here that'll show me over the last 5 years, and really what it is showing me is that the total value of your capital assets has been going down. So therefore you're amortizing more than what you're adding. So that means when you look at the revenues and the expenses, it would explain why the orange bar is higher than the blue bar. So it's more of a, more so an accounting presentation thing than as opposed to actually, in essence, losing money. And I seem to be frozen again, I think.
No, you're back.
Oh, okay. All right. All right. So, yeah, so it's just looking at that graph, Scott, it's more of the fact that you're just having more amortization than you did have additions in that time period. So it's I think really that if you go to, I think the page called the analysis of your accumulated surplus, it's the fact that you still have a township surplus. Keep going right there, Kate. You will see there the fact that your invested in capital assets has been decreasing. So that means it's causing your expenses to be higher, but operational wise, your township still has a surplus, and your reserve and reserve funds continued to increase over those years. So it's more of a presentation thing than saying you're losing money. And it's a bit of a complicated answer, just trying to switch between PSAB reporting and tax rate reporting.
When I see any bar graph that shows that the in is less than the out, I become concerned, Richard.
Yeah. But that's why on this page it's segregated between capital and reserves and operating surplus. So it's those two items are moving in both your township surplus and your reserve and reserve funds are moving in the right direction or staying in the right direction. Your waterworks, I think you'll need to try to reduce that operational deficit moving forward. And then who knows whether there'll be any funding for future capital work, but that would then increase your capital as well. So.
And we'll be discussing that very item later in the same meeting, Richard.
Oh, okay. All right.
Any other questions from council? I have one probably more directed to Nuzrat. You can still hear us, Nuzrat. Of the $5.5 million in reserves, how much of that money is what I don't know what the right phrase is, I would call it unencumbered. Like how much is not spoken for already? And some of that money must be already earmarked to be spent on specific items.
To you, Mr. Mayor, yes. I just don't have that answer with me in terms of what has been committed, but that's something I can get back to you later.
Sure. And when you do, would you include all of council, please?
Absolutely.
Thank you. So if there are no other questions with regard to audit, again, thank you very much, Richard. Oh, I see Pat.
Mine's actually a really minor question. Something I've been curious about for years. Right at, I don't know, about page 3, when you're talking about the, I think it's the jobs of, one of the jobs that you do is review council minutes. Am I assuming that that's simply to make sure we've made the appropriate motions for transfers to reserves and things?
That, and to ensure if there's items discussed that might indicate you have an unrecorded liability or something such as that, or a legal settlement or certain things like that that don't always come about in the normal course. Those are the type of things we look at, and approval for sometimes contracts and reserves and the budget and borrowing bylaws.
I was just thinking that's a lot of minutes to go through in a year. Well, thank you.
Yes.
All right. So we're looking for a mover and a seconder. The council receives the audited 2019 financial statements as presented by Baker Tilly.
I'll move
make
for
that
approval.
motion, Bill.
Sorry, everybody talked over. I think I have Pat as a mover.
Scott will second.
Thank you. Any further discussion? I'll call the vote then. Scott,
Yay.
Pat,
Yay.
Mark,
Yay.
Larry,
Yay.
Bill also votes yay. Motion's carried. Again, thank you, Richard. This is an open meeting. If you care to stay and participate, you're more than welcome. But if you thought you had something pressing that you could get to, we would not be offended if you decided to leave us. So.
Well, thank you for that offer, but unfortunately, I have my fourth one of these meetings coming up next, so of today. So, yeah, but
Good.
all right.
Good luck.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.
So we're moving to 5.2, climate action plan, and hopefully we have Judy out there somewhere, our environmental officer with Northumberland County. Were we able to? There he popped right up. Way to go.
Hello.
How are you today?
Thank you.
Thank you for being with us.
My pleasure.
I'm going to turn this over to you right now.
Okay. Well, thank you, members of council. As you may recall, under the Paris Agreement, Canada committed to reducing greenhouse gas emissions by 30% below 2005 levels by 2030. Additionally, the Ontario Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks committed Ontario to meeting these same reductions. In early 2019, Northumberland County, in partnership with the town of Cobourg, the municipality of Port Hope, and the township of Hamilton, completed a successful application to the Federation of Canadian Municipalities Climate Innovation Program. The grant for the climate mitigation project of $122,400 is funding a 2-year full-time to be made permanent environmental officer position residing at the county. The position is to develop and begin to implement a greenhouse gas emissions reduction plan at the county and liaising with the 3 municipalities to develop similar energy conservation and emission reduction plans, or climate action plans as they're called, for each of the 3 municipalities. To carry out this initiative, there's several years of data that have to be entered into the software made available by the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. And I will oversee the climate change summer student who will be working virtually for 8 weeks to enter the Hamilton Township data. Therefore, we need the resolution presented today, passed by council, in order to get access to the Federation, the FCM software, which is already being used by Cobourg, Port Hope, and the county. As you may recall from the PowerPoint that I submitted earlier, if you have questions with regard to that, I think the particularly important point is that climate change is affecting all municipalities and residents, no matter how large or small. And there have been many examples in recent history of tornadoes, droughts, severe rain events, and the situation, according to the International Panel on Climate Change, is that by 2030, if we don't start flattening the curve, which is a term I think we're all very familiar with, we will enter a period of runaway climate change, which we increasingly won't be able to control. So the necessity to start thinking now and planning now to increase the efficiency of our buildings and switch and decarbonize our electricity system so that we have our transportation system electrified and move off of fossil fuels is coming to a very critical juncture. And it's not something that in this PowerPoint, it's pointed out that we have a choice to do in the future, because every action and measure we take today is influencing the future climate for our children and grandchildren. And so I'm here today to answer any questions you have with regard to the resolution and or with regard to the PowerPoint. Thanks for this opportunity.
Thank you for your presentation, and the PowerPoint was very enlightening. I went through it last night. It was very interesting. I'm going to turn this over to members of council. If there are any questions.
It's Larry. The data that you're going to be inputting for Hamilton Township this summer, where was that data collected from and who provided it to you?
Well, we haven't started collecting it, but there's a conservation and demand management plan that each municipality has had to develop every 5 years. And every summer by July 1st, they have to send into the province the amount of energy, electric and natural gas or other fossil fuel energy that's used by buildings. So that should be readily available already. But since we have to go back quite a few years, we need to be able to see what the trend has been in terms of buildings. And the other component is on the community side. We have to connect with Hydro and Enbridge to get data for the amount of residential, commercial, and industrial energy per municipality. And the combination of that, plus the fleet vehicles and an algorithm for how much traffic there is in the environs of the municipality, are added in as well. The waste data, which also it comes into play at the county level because of the methane emissions, isn't counted at the at Hamilton Township level. But so it'll be based on your fleets, your street lights, your own municipal buildings, and then on the community side, it'll be the residential, commercial, and industrial energy use. So that'll be the basis for which we determine how to reduce emissions by 30% below what they were in 2005. Given that population continues to grow, and economic activity continues to grow. So we'll plot that business as usual scenario to 2030, and then we'll see what we have to look at removing over the next 10 years in terms of greenhouse gases from that equation so that they meet that target of 30% below 2005 levels. I hope that didn't sound like too much gobbledygook.
No, very good. In addition, what staff members are involved in that from our point of view? Or is that...
Well, there has been an application for a Canada Summer Works grant or Summer Jobs grant, and there is at least one student that I'm aware of that has worked on these same data sets that could work virtually from home. Other than that, there would be the fleet manager or transportation manager would need to provide some data on your fleet vehicles, and possibly some, well, of course, later on, we'll be looking at measures. And in that case, interviewing staff for suggestions of where they see improvements possibly happening within the municipality that we could calculate the greenhouse gas reduction benefits from. And of course, there's some others that I could suggest, because it's basically buildings, fleets, and buildings and transportation that are the two big numbers that we have to address, where fossil fuels are generally used.
I was wondering if in the future, if we've got plans, for instance, for our fleets, what the plans for the future are to try to reduce greenhouse gas from our fleets, such as anti-idling with the roads department when they're on a site, or reduce finding right-sized vehicles in the future. I wonder, I know it's difficult when we, to have staff and the cost per staff. I know there's a number of concerned citizens within the township that would sort of get involved as an advisory committee to help plan our future for reducing greenhouse gas. And I wonder if council would be interested in engaging conversation about that, to develop an advisory committee on the environment. I know Blue Dot has come forward a couple of times, but I know there's a lot of well-educated, well-qualified people that could work on this with us.
That's definitely true. In Cobourg and Port Hope, they each have an environmental advisory committee that acts as part of a community forum to council on the climate plan. And so I would welcome a similar body for Hamilton Township that could work with me and with the township to make suggestions.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I'm listening, Larry. I'm listening. So would we start at a committee level with the discussion, Arthur? Would that come to corporate, or would be another committee that would be better suited to get that, to take a look at that and get that ball rolling?
The main use areas, well, it affects so many. It affects the corporate, affects public works. It affects parks and recreation facilities, as Judy's mentioned, across those sort of three areas. If I could suggest having some discussion at corporate, we would welcome to give some ideas on how that either might be set up as a township committee, whether it's similar to the Parks and Recreation community-based committee that we have, or whether it would be at first council committee. We could come up with some ideas, allow council to then decide how to structure it and proceed from there.
Okay, thank you. So we can maybe get that on next month's corporate. And in the meantime, if there are any members of council who are not on corporate services who like input, you can email Arthur or me and CC Arthur, or CC a whole bunch of us, or whatever. But
Sure.
Get your idea sent forward before next month's meeting. Pat, I've seen your hand moving 2 or 3 times.
Yeah, yeah, I have a question for Judy. So what's the PCP program? And it talks about the 5 milestones. None of them seem to directly have an educational component. When you talk about an advisory committee, that's where my brain ended up going to as well, was there may be other ways to get information out there. But the transportation part in a rural area, yes, we can do things at the municipality, but just the amount of cars on the road because of the travel distances involved. Is there anything that is going along with this from the educational side?
I think once you have a draft and have some input into that draft from, say, an advisory committee, it can go out to the community at large for consultation and further suggestions and, whether they approve or disapprove of some of the ideas. That is generally the path that's followed. In terms of education, it's evolved. Like, if we've been working on climate change plans for frankly over 30 years now, and it's pretty clear where the measures have to be administered. And because of the shortness of time now, we're moving more into a transitional situation rather than an incremental situation. So you will likely see more emphasis on electrification of fleets, although when it comes to pickup trucks and heavy duty vehicles, we're still a few years away from having good vehicles to choose from. And from housing, in terms of housing or new buildings or even retrofitting existing buildings, the standards are moving up rapidly to levels where buildings are going to be 70% more fuel efficient in retrofits and up to 90% more fuel efficient in new construction. And you'll see the federal government has already adopted that standard. The new marina that they're building in Cobourg is the new, not marina, but the Coast Guard building is a net zero building, net zero energy building. So there's a real emphasis on making a change and making sure people are trained to make these changes. It can create an awful lot of jobs in communities across Canada.
Anyone else? All right, thank you then. This presentation has come with a request for council resolution. So we're looking for a mover and a seconder. Please, that council supports the Partners for Climate Protection Program resolution as presented.
I'll move, Bill.
Thank you. That's
I'll
Mark.
second it, Larry.
Thank you very much. Any further discussion? I'm going to call the vote then. Scott,
Yay.
Pat,
Yay.
Mark,
Yay.
Larry,
Yay.
Bill also votes yay. Motion is carried. Thank you once again, Judy, for your time.
It's been my pleasure, and thank you very much. Take care.
Have a good day.
Thanks.
So moving to Section 6, Planning Act reports, we have none. Section 7, adoption of previous council meetings. Looking for a movement or seconder for the minutes of the regular council meeting held May 19th, 2020 be adopted.
Larry.
Thank you. Seconder.
Scott.
Thank you, Scott. Any discussion? Okay, call the vote again. Scott,
Yay.
Pat,
Yay.
Mark,
Yay.
Larry,
Yay.
Bill, yay. There's no business arising listed in our agenda. Did anyone, member of council, want to introduce anything from that? Section 9, committee reports, there are none. Section 10, Public Works and Infrastructure. We're working at report 2020-03, REAR consultant selection. Do we have Scott there somewhere? Anything to put forward before we put the motion on the floor?
No, simply here to ask any questions during that phase.
All right, then let's get a mover and seconder then that report WO 2020-03 regarding the consultant selection for the asset review and water rate study be received for information.
Larry?
Thank you. Seconded.
I'll second.
Thanks, Mark. I'll open for discussion now. Does anyone have any questions for Scott? Seeing or hearing none, then I'll call the motion. All in favor, Scott,
Yay.
Pat,
Yay.
Mark,
Yay.
Larry,
Yay.
Bill votes yay. Motion's carried. Thank you, everyone. Recreations and facilities have no reports.
Bill?
12,
Sorry, Mayor Kane,
yes.
sorry, I was
Oh,
trying to
that's fine.
catch your attention.
That's all right.
Um,
My name's Bill.
If I just want to go back one step, that that was, as you ran through everybody, that's effectively a recorded vote. So we were just trying to
Okay.
make sure that we were aware that since this was a water issue, we've recorded everybody's name associated with that passing. So thank you for that.
No, thank you for catching me up. So again, 12 corporate services. Report PNG 2020-13 is a zoning bylaw complaint contravention procedures. Should we get a mover and seconder before we open it up for discussion then? Please, mover and a seconder that report PNG 2020-15, June 16, 20 zoning contravention protocols draft PNP for complaints revised. I'm assuming this edition 2 be moved by
Larry?
and seconded by Pat. Now up for discussion or for input from staff.
I have something, Bill, if I could.
Yes, Mark.
Yeah, dealing with the complaints and so forth, quite often staff presume that a case is closed and somebody may come in compliance, but sometimes that compliance is only for a short period of time and then they're back to where they were a month or 2 months later, and staff go back and they start the process all over again and sending letters and so forth.
Excuse me, Mark, I don't want to interrupt you, but you froze and we missed the whole, just about everything that you said up to that. Sorry.
Sorry, I'll start over again.
Yeah, you'll have to.
Back to the process. When a complaint comes in, staff quite often open the complaint up, and what will happen is sometimes it'll get resolved, and then 3 or 4, or maybe even 2 or 3 months later, the issue comes a problem again, and staff again, they don't act on it. They're again wait for someone to complain, and they start the process all over again. And sometimes this becomes cumbersome because people don't always especially the public don't always realize that they have to put the complaint in again to get the process rolling again. They think after they put the complaint in, it should be an automatic staff go out. And I'm not so sure that's anywhere within this report that that there is a time limit or a timing on when a case is opened and closed. And I've read this report last night, maybe I've missed it. But I'd like to see where that once a complaint is given and once staff starts acting on it, that it at least stays on file for a year. In other words, if that complaint or that it goes back into becomes an issue again, that staff can automatically go ahead and proceed with it rather than wait for somebody to complain again or wait or start the whole process over again, even, which I do know of one recently that they've got a number of letters sent to them only because they'll go in compliance for a month and then a month later they're out of compliance and then staff starts the process again. So unless Sandra can show me somewhere in here where that's looked after, I'd really like to see that once a complaint's put in, that it's monitored for at least a year. And then it doesn't just start all over again all the time, because that's frustrating not only for the public that makes that complaint, but also for quite often counselors hear about it and quite often other staff hear about it. So I mean, it's just something I'd like to see in here that says that it's got to be at least a year that sits there, and once the year is up, then you can maybe look at starting the whole process over again, but not just because it's in compliance within 1 month.
I have not addressed that issue, but I'm happy to try and put some protocols in place. I appreciate that input. Thank you.
Bill,
Anyone
I have
else?
a couple of components, if I might.
Yes, Scott.
It's just moved off our screen here just recently, but there was a reference of 10 days in respect, there it is again. Was that 10 days a draft number, or is that what's actually proposed in this report?
It's kind of both. I don't want to give somebody a lot of time, because then that's saying in some aspects you have permission to continue to be in contravention, which is not what we're saying. But we do need to understand that if you have chickens on your property in downtown Baltimore and you're not allowed to, you can't get rid of those overnight. We understand it takes time, and we want to be reasonable. And if you continue to read through this, we've tried to craft it so that we give you 10 days to get rid of your chickens, as a standard example, if you will let me do that. 10 days to get rid of your chickens, but then you contact me on day 7 and say, we've been trying and we can't get anybody. However, we can get somebody, you'll take them by the middle of next month. I'm going to work with you. The township's going to work with you, you being the offender. But I think we do need to give a time frame, because we don't want that just, well, get rid of them. Oh yeah, I will next month. We have to give a time frame. If council is not comfortable with a standard 10 days, again, staff is definitely open to a suggestion. I don't want to go too much past 14 days or 15 business days. I want to keep it quite manageable and something that we can remember in the back of our heads. And you have to remember that this is because the person possibly next door has put up with this for some time and said, you know what, enough is enough. Let's get this fixed. So we don't want to give it too long and make the neighbor suffer any longer than they already have.
My question relates as to the start time of that 10 days. The way I read this paragraph, I see a staff member going to a site that may or may not have actual contact with the property owner at that point in time, but yet a letter's being sent out. If a letter's being sent out and they're advised in that letter that they have 10 days to bring it into compliance, by the time the letter's into the postal system and out again, which I presume is going to be our method of communication, that letter is hardly received by the property owner before the 10 days is already up. So I have concerns with that. In addition to that, staff are, the way again I read the paragraph, staff are going back at the end of 10 days to ensure compliance. And again, the property owner may in fact only have 1 or 2 days after the receipt of the information to actually bring the property into compliance, which is potentially unreasonable. The other component of this report that I should speak to now, just because of communication methods we're using, is that it's towards the end of the report where it says that this information will be forwarded to the municipal solicitor prior to it going to council. And then in the council report section, it says it may have a report going to council. Well, for me, there's an opportunity here for a great deal of expense from a municipal solicitor before council even knows about it. Whether council would support that or not remains to be seen on the basis that's an individual account. So I don't like the word may, that it'll go to the council. And I don't like it being sent off to the township solicitor with the potential of a high expense before council knows about it. And that's where I'll quit, because that's the full extent of my comments on the report.
To your point on going to legal before council, I understand that point. Council wants to be well aware of monies being spent. The other side of that is that contraventions of the zoning bylaw, I'm given to understand from our solicitor that we need to work quickly on these. They are within a time limited portion of the law. So I could get a complaint this afternoon and I can't bring anything and start working with whomever, and then I can't bring anything back to council until mid-July. I would want to quite possibly, I and the CAO, zoning administrator, would want to get things off to legal prior to mid-July. Not to say that I would put something forward to legal on Monday and then make sure something's at council on the following Tuesday. Yeah, definitely I'd be on top of that, but I don't necessarily want to wait for council's permission to go to legal when it's something that needs to be addressed quite urgently. But I'm really happy for this conversation. This is where I want the input to continue with the policies and procedures.
Bill, can I respond to that without taking anybody else's time here?
Yeah, I'm still looking at it. Scott, go ahead.
If we're doing a site, if you had a complaint today, did a site visit, and chances are you're not going to get there the day you receive it, and you go and you do a site visit, and you do a letter, and you do a follow-up 10 days later, and I'm suggesting it's not long enough, then the majority of time between this council meeting and the next available council meeting is already gone by the procedure process that we're trying to attempt to follow. I don't feel comfortable, and forgive me when I refer to my history, but I have seen some extremely large solicitor bills for some frivolous items that should never have been proceeded with. I don't feel comfortable in not knowing about those at the council table first.
If I may comment, Bill?
Okay, I've got Larry first.
Sorry.
Then
Yeah,
you.
I'll go after Larry then.
Larry's giving me the all safe sign. Go ahead, Mark.
Most times I would agree with what Scott's saying and waiting. And perhaps you could wait most months, but quite often council takes August off also. So it leaves staff very little time after August. And I know for things if it has to go to court, it makes it very, very difficult to get it into court in time and to proceed in time and so forth. I know we've had issues before where, if you get too late into the season, quite often a judge will say, we're not going to, can't deal with it now. It's too, we're too far into the season. You're going to have to, let the fellow come in compliance by next spring kind of thing. So it really puts things behind, especially, I know what happened with vehicles and that type of thing that were not in compliance. And sometimes there's a lot of leniency when it comes to fall and winter months when things go to court. So it does make it a little difficult. I can see staff's problems and issues there. So perhaps, Sandra could look at the wording of that and perhaps staff could also get a report, perhaps from the lawyers that's ready to come to council for council to make it if it's pressing that it has to come to council that it would be all ready to go when it does come in September, not wait till September and then start the process so that you lose the September month and the October month. I don't think it's going to be a lot of these, at least I would hope not. I think a lot of these have disappeared, a lot of these complaints and issues, but maybe I'm wrong. I haven't seen any lately to know, or report on these lately to know. But from what I gather, I presume they're less than they used to be. So, but that's my interpretation on it anyway.
All right. You're still okay, Larry? Okay.
My question is for point one. So if you want to close this discussion off.
Okay, thank you. I'll come back to you then. I'm wondering, I think at some point we have to allow some staff discretion. with these matters. I'm also nervous, as Scott is, about, you know, some large frivolous bill. Is there any way we could put some upper limit so that staff could go forward with some of these things? I mean, surely we don't go into legal matters and not get some sort of an idea what it's going to cost us before we give them the go ahead. I mean, we must be getting some sort of an estimate. And if we're not, we should be. I mean, so is there some sort of upper number limit that we would feel comfortable with that Sandra could put in this, that she wouldn't have to run back to council every time? I'd throw that over to some of our senior staff, clerks, treasurers, CAOs, or planning, or whoever that might know something more about this than I do.
So if I may, through Mayor Kane, try and deal with the issue. First of all, we're trying to catch or codify some processes that we think will help us with the enforcing of the zoning bylaw. And if you could scroll down just slightly, Kate, the latter parts, as we're getting to inspections, compliance requests, a second compliance request, it's at that point that we're looking. So for example, we do an on-site meeting on 4. It may include rather an on-site meeting. The second letter confirming agreed upon actions, timeframes. Only after we've had that meeting, we were proposing that me as the zoning administrator would be able to at least seek legal advice for our options. Getting a draft letter might also be appropriate. If we can solve the issue with either stepping in the issue up from being a staff one to then going to our solicitors, that may bring a resolve to the issue to get the individual to stop the contravention of the bylaw. We're not trying to spend the money inappropriate unnecessarily with a large legal bill, but we're looking for that area or that room where if we could get a brief legal opinion or if we can get a letter, that will equip us with more information if we have to take it further to council. So it avoids sort of I could call it sort of like waiting to the next month. We would have some action in some cases, or we would come back to council with a better sense of what we've done, that we've involved, have a legal opinion, and then we have a better opportunity for a more complete discussion and direction from council at that point. That was our proposal, but obviously we're happy to make some updates, whether it's a financial limit or a assessment limit before we proceed past a certain point.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else on this particular part? Okay, Larry, you wanted to go back to section 1?
I just wanted to get some clarification, if I could. It says a signed written complaint shall be received before action is taken. It will be date stamped, signed file number. Unassigned or anonymous complaints will not be processed. In the process, is the person who made the complaint identified to the offender?
Not at all.
There is a concern that people have about making complaints because of retribution.
Yes.
And also a number of people have made comment to me is why are the people or the public having to make complaints for properties that don't comply? Mostly in cases of, refuse around the property or the unsightliness of the property. I know it's a problem because we've talked about this with Tim, that it might be impossible if there's only 2 bylaw enforcement officers to go around and sort of check to make sure that properties are being kept in good condition.
We do have the complaint form process because, as you say, we've got the 2 bylaw enforcement officers and they can't be everywhere. We need people to keep us apprised of what's going on in their neighborhood. When somebody does call us and say whatever it is they're going to say about their neighbor, we explain that we need the complaint form, and they often pull back and say, well, because of retribution. We do take the time. I've heard Tim and Mike and myself a number of times say, no, we need you to sign it. to activate it, but it does remain anonymous to your neighbor. They will not know who it is. Even if they wish to receive a copy of the complaint form, we will black out your information so that you, Mr. Williamson, will not be identified. We do also explain or advise, recommend to the complainant that when they're filling out the form, they do not say the person next door to me. They say the person at 1234 Main Street, because anybody can make a complaint about anybody. It's not necessarily just the guy next door who can make a complaint. So we do take the time to try and ease the public into giving us the proper complaint form to help us along with our process. We also do usually take the time to say to them, now, if this does go to court at some point in the future, you might be called in, you might be subpoenaed, is the word I'm looking for. It's very rare that it happens, but just so you know. And it does leave a level of comfort for them that we take this time to explain that they will remain anonymous to their neighbor, but we need to have the file in full. Sorry, I lost your second point there. I beg your pardon.
Through Mayor Kane to Councillor Williamson. So I think basically we do try and we keep the information of the individual anonymous so that there isn't the retribution. However, we are not staffed for the staff to go out and sort of proactively look for contraventions of bylaw. We are in a react to those complaints and we then take action. This avoids sort of staff going along and cherry picking, saying, well, I you know, for whatever reason, it avoids this whole issue of saying, well, I don't like the color of that house, so I'm going to go and put a complaint on it. It means it's actually resident-based complaints or other complaints that are written by someone who has formally submitted it to us. So that's when we act. We don't act on a sort of proactive basis as such, and we try and keep that information confidential. So because we do respect the fact that there might be one neighbor raising something about another neighbor, and we try and have it written in a generic fashion.
Bill?
Yes, go ahead, Scott.
Just for a point of clarity, this policy and procedure that we're looking at here is for zoning bylaw infractions, not to be confused with other municipal bylaws like the property standards bylaw. We've deviated a little bit into other documents. And just want to make sure everybody knows that this is the zoning bylaw that we're dealing with here only.
Thank you. That's a good point, Scott. Okay, if I don't hear anything more, then I have, oh, yes.
Sorry, thought you'd seen my hand earlier.
We got 4 pictures up, Pat, right now. I'm unfortunately.
I'm on the sidelines. Got it. Okay, so here's my 2 cents. I understand what Scott was saying about zoning, not bylaw or not property standards, but Sandra had mentioned things like multiple cars on the property that is part of zoning, right? Like in certain zones, you may have more vehicles, or is that different again? Is that
If somebody has a number of vehicles on their property, this is my understanding of property standards. I am not the expert on property standards. If the vehicles are properly legally licensed, then they can be there. If they're unlicensed vehicles, they could be deemed to be derelict, and that's a property standards issue. But if you have a number of vehicles on your property, whether they're licensed or not, and you're turning around and selling them from your residential property, then you're into my area, and you've turned your house into a car dealership, and that's not going to sit well with me.
okay? That was what I originally thought, but then with the back and forth conversation, I started to get confused. I just in general, going back to what we were talking about earlier, I'm with Mark in terms of I think that we have to have some ability for people to go forward on the legal side of things. And if I understood Arthur correctly, can we say you can go this far but not the next? So they could go and ask for a letter, but not to go beyond that without council's notification. Would that cover Scott's concern? Okay, so personally, that's the way I would like to see that addressed in this document.
I'll buy in there because that was kind of a question heading my way. I would be supportive of that early on contact with the lawyer for an opinion or for a letter, but turning the file over to them to actually do prosecution is where the expense really builds up. And that's where I would have voiced my major concern earlier.
Agreed.
I quite agree. Thank you. Yep, for the
Okay.
clarification through the mayor.
So before we just leave that section 1, then I think this is where I get into some problems. A couple of months ago with the property on Burnham Street, there was not a formal written complaint, and yet we had a situation of someone living in the back of an old truck or something. That's not property standards. That has to be zoning. And if we are aware that there is a safety issue, a liability issue, and we don't act on it, I can't believe that we're not putting ourselves in a really awkward position. A fire hazard as well. I mean, that place is still accepting piles and piles of wood chips. There's a sign right on the road that says dump at the back. I mean, there's going to be a mountain of wood chips in there. I mean, they could heat up. It could be a huge fire. I don't believe we can sit back and wait for members of the public always to complain. How do we, as a council, as a staff, become proactive?
But you
Bill,
have to remember that as planning coordinator, I am not authorized to go onto somebody's property. I've worded this policy and procedure carefully so that you are aware that when I go out to do my initial review, any pictures I'm taking, any view I'm taking of the property, it's from street side. I often make sure that my pictures show that I am across the street taking the photo so that there's no question of trespassing, because I'm not authorized to do anything. The chief building official and deputy chief building official have other rights and privileges under the definition of their positions, but I can't do that. That's why I've also said engage them as necessary for assistance. I can't go out beating the bushes. I have to make sure that something comes in to me and that I respect my limitations.
Bill, if I might again,
Go ahead, Scott.
probably thoughts from the past, but there's always going to be an overlap between zoning, property standards, fire, and building code regulations. I think what we might need to do here today is look at the smaller picture of what we're trying to deal with. We're simply looking at a policy and procedure for the zoning end of things. Maybe it needs to be tweaked a little bit. However, I think, Bill, what you're speaking of is a site-specific issue that needs a bigger review than just this document. It's an unsafe item. We need our staff to get together and formulate a process of authority and jurisdiction when there is an item like what you're describing on Burnham Street. We need an opportunity to go to those unsafe items immediately. I believe that we do have that opportunity under the legislation and don't need a complaint to process that. But we need maybe to compare our policies and procedures of zoning, property standards, and unsafe items all in a bigger picture by our staff, rather than trying to bring it into this one document at this point in time.
That's accepted. So the next question is, what would be the next step then? Where does that come forward again? Are we back to corporate services? Is that not? I'm seeing head shakes. So it's back to corporate services. Mark?
I was just going to say, when you have an issue like that or that you're aware of, I mean, that doesn't stop council members from putting in filling out a complaint form. So, I mean, if you know of one like that, and I know I've done them in the past, and I'm sure the other council members have, you just simply fill out the complaint form and it's looked after. So it's, you don't want it to get by the wayside, like as you've mentioned, and sometimes they are, they are in need to be and urgently to get them done. So by all means, council can fill out the complaint form.
Yes.
Okay.
One thing I want to point out, I can see the necessity and the benefits of comparing this set of policy and procedures versus property standards and unsafe items and whatever. I also think that we need to put something in place here because there are a number of contraventions in place that I really need to get on top of. And I've actually pulled back with the clerk, pulled back a couple of reports that were expected at council today because we don't have the P&P in place yet. So we're getting the policies and procedures in place, and then I'm going to be going forward with the active complaints that I have open now. I understand this was a discussion item, and I didn't expect a final decision today, but it is, I think we need something in place and then have direction to also compare with property standards at a future date.
Okay, so if I could try to move this along, then as I understand, we've had 2 or 3 tweaks, as Scott put it, put forward, which I'm sure Kate and or Sandra have made notes of. How does that affect our vote and our motion? We've moved to accept the report. Can we do that knowing that we want some changes made to it?
My report was put forward for discussion purposes in my
Okay.
point of view.
Okay, that's not the way I read it. I don't believe that's the way I read the motion. I believe that the way the motion was read, that we were going to accept it as written. So I'll ask Kate or Arthur how we proceed here.
Mayor Kane, may I speak to that?
Please do.
Okay, so we don't have any formal policy for staff to follow, and we're trying to be consistent with all residents in the municipality as to how we treat them. So we talked about this policy at the last coordinator meeting, and then we worked on it to try to establish a cohesive process, but there are often times, because of the zoning bylaw, it's very difficult. We could send letters every month. And when you have some residents that just don't want to comply, but yet that is our job, is to try to seek some kind of a resolve on these things. Sometimes it gets to that point where we do perhaps need to have a letter from our municipal solicitor sent to the resident to instruct them to take some action on this. And that's really what we're trying to get to at this point, because we're just spinning our wheels, because it's the same thing. We tell them that they need to come into conformity. They don't want to meet with us. We send them a letter, we go out and inspect. We send them a letter, we go out and inspect. Where we were hoping this way, and I understand what Deputy Mayor Jibb was saying, we just hope that this way is that because the CAO is the zoning administrator, that council will authorize that administrator to be able to at least seek some legal advice from our municipal solicitor, which may very well be him sending a letter out, or the situation might be much more complex than that, in which we would then take to council for direction.
I agree we need to put something in place to stop all the procrastination beyond a shadow of a doubt. The only one I don't want to let go here is Scott's issue about some upper limit. I mean, And I believe that we already got confirmation, or I guess agreement, I would say, from our CAO that he's also he agrees with what Scott's trying to get through. So do we need to make any changes to this report before we vote on it to make sure that that's in the report?
You know, Bill, I'm still concerned that we don't have anything in there as far as time limits go. I mean, and I've heard this one over and over from staff where they start these processes
Yes.
over and over, even after they come in compliance. And I mean,
Right, that's
something.
sorry, Mark, I had that written down, that Mark's got the 1 year, the idea of 1 year carrying it forward for that length of time so that it just doesn't come back month after month. So how do we get those couple of changes into this?
Bill,
We can't-
might I suggest, we got a motion on the floor that we need to address, and then maybe the thing to do is defer this back to staff so they can bring it forward next month with the tweaking that we need.
How does that sound from a staff viewpoint? I'm getting some head shakes from
I'm
council.
happy enough to do that.
Okay, we can do, through Mayor Kane, we can do either that, or if you accept the policy, subject to amendments for a 1 year, a provision including a complaint to remain for a year, and a provision that limits the financial exposure through our legal discussions to a letter and a legal opinion, but not proceeding court action without council approval. And we'll come back with those updates that council will be able to accept at the next council meeting as part of amendments. The alternative is just to make those amendments and bring them back next month. So I'm saying we could accept the policy today, subject to those two amendments, or we will do that and proceed, or we'll go ahead with taking it away, making the adjustments and bringing it back for council approval in July.
Well, the first option gets us a month ahead of the game.
Bill?
Yes.
I need clarification at this point because I can't scroll back. Was our original motion to open this for discussion or to approve the policies as they were written?
Sorry, I'm just reading back myself. We've had a mover and a seconder that report PNG 2020-15, June 16th, 20, zoning contravention protocols, drafts and complaints, revision 2, be passed for, it doesn't say anything about receive for information. I think we've moved it as a motion to accept.
Okay, because I thought that was just, let me catch my words here. I thought what our actual motion was to accept the report. But you're saying it's to accept the whole thing. I really like the idea, if whoever made the motion is willing to adjust it, that we amend the motion to include the changes that Arthur just mentioned as a friendly amendment.
I don't know who moved and seconded, but I like that idea as well.
Me too.
It was moved by Councillor Williamson, seconded by Councillor McCourt.
I agree to the motion, to revision of the motion
And the amendments, right?
and the amendments.
And I do,
You do as well, Pat?
yes, I accept the amendments.
Okay, so that being said, and if there's no further discussion, we can vote on this with those two friendly amendments. Say, Mayor, Deputy Mayor Jib,
Okay,
Pat,
Yay.
Mark,
Ye-
Larry,
Yay.
Bill is yay, motion is carried. Thank you, staff and council, for that. It was a constructive discussion.
Thank you.
12.2, we're looking at a policy exemption. We need a mover and a seconder that report BLDG 2020-03 regarding a request for policy exemption for plumbing in a non-residential accessory building be received. And the council of the township of Hamlin and acts as follows. The council approves the request from Willie Casteels for the exemption of the township policy with respect to plumbing permits for a non-residential / accessory building limited to one toilet sink and a hose bib for a proposed accessory building on the property located at 2744 Castle Hill Drive.
I'll move that, Bill. Moved by Mark.
I'll second it, Bill. Scott?
Thank you. Discussion? I hear none, so I'll call the vote. Scott,
Yay.
Pat,
Yay.
Mark,
Yay.
Larry,
Yay.
Bill also is yay. Motion is carried. 12.3, report BLDG 2020-04. Look for a mover and a seconder that report BLDG 2020-04 regarding the 2019 building permit statistics, as well as the fourth quarter monthly statistics be received for information.
I'll move, Pat.
I'll second it, Larry.
Thank you. Any discussion? Any points wish to be made by staff? Hearing none, I'll call the vote again. Scott,
Yay.
Pat,
Yay.
Mark,
Yay.
Larry,
Yay.
Bill is also yay. Motion's carried. 12.5, COVID-19 financial assistance. Looking for a mover and a seconder. That report T 2020-10 regarding COVID-19 financial assistance be received. The Council of the Township of Hamilton and acts as follows.
Excuse me, Mayor Kane.
Yes.
We skipped past 12.4, which was another building report 2020-04.
Thanks. Thank you. I checked them both off in one film.
They seem to have the same number. Sorry about that. Should be 2020-05.
Okay. I thought I just read that. When I read it, I was like, oh, I just read that.
Okay.
So I wasn't totally stunned. That's good. Thanks. Thanks for that little excuse given it. Okay. So 12.4 building BLDG 2020-05. Looking for a mover and a seconder that report building 2020-05 regarding the 2020 building statistics, January to March, we received for information.
I'll move that, Pat.
Thank you. Seconder Larry, thank you. Any discussion? Call the vote. Scott,
Yay.
Pat,
Yay.
Mark,
Yay.
Larry,
Yay.
Bill is yay. Motion's carried. Now 12.5. So we're looking for a mover and a seconder that report T 2020-10 regarding the COVID-19 financial assistance we received. As the Council of the Township of Hamilton acts as follows. The council adopts the following measures in order to provide financial relief to ratepayers experiencing financial hardship due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Waive penalties and interest charges on unpaid property taxes for July of 2020 and waive penalties charged on unpaid water bills for July of 2020. Have a mover and a seconder.
Scott will move.
Mark will second.
Thank you. Any discussion? All votes.
One.
Sorry.
For the water, penalties charges different from interest. Is it a flat amount normally?
I have to defer to staff because I don't have that answer.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it is a percentage, based on the percentage, and we normally charge penalties on unpaid water bills.
Okay, so it's a percentage that's done by. Thank you.
Further questions? So we have mover and seconder. I'll call the vote. Scott,
Yay.
Pat,
Yay.
Mark,
Yay.
Larry,
Yay.
Bill is yay. Motion's carried. Report 12.6 T 2020-11. Read the 2019 reserve and reserve fund balances. Looking for a mover and a seconder that report T 2020-11 regarding the 2019 reserves and reserve fund balances for your information. Thank you, Larry. A seconder.
Scott, will second.
Thank you. Is there discussion? I had a couple about policing. I thought we'd done something with that police reserve. I thought it had already been put into general reserves. That's it.
To you, Mr. Mayor, yes, that motion was approved in 2020. This reflects 2019 balances, so that transfer will happen in 2020.
Okay, thank you very much. My mistake. One other one I did have a question was, and I don't have the answer myself, but I should have. I'm on police work services, but that BEAR program, it's not even functional anymore, is it? We've got an $8,000 reserve sitting there. I don't know what that would ever be used for. Should that be something I should take forward to the Police Services Board?
I haven't heard anything from Police Service Board in terms of that, so that's something you may need to take it to them.
Yeah, so I'm going to take that to the next Services Board to try to get some clarity on it, because I haven't heard anything about the DARE program for years. So that's money just sitting there. I know it's only $8,000, but it's still $8,000. It's just sitting there collecting dust. So I'll try to bring that forward at our next meeting and inform council and treasurer of what's going on there. So anything else on reserves? So we have a motion. I'll call the vote. Scott? Yay. Pat?
Yay.
Mark?
Yay.
Larry?
Yay.
Bill is also yay. Head shakes count.
Especially when you can't find the mute button.
Head shakes count. 12.6, report T 2020-11. Reserve funds, I guess we just did that one. 2020-12, our financial statement. That report T 2020-12, 2020 first quarter financial report for the March 31st, 2020. Be accepted for information. Moved by Larry, seconder. Scott, thank you. Any discussion? I'll call the vote then. Scott?
Yay.
Pat?
Yay.
Mark?
Yay.
Larry?
Yay.
Bill is yay. Motion is carried. (12.8) report T 2020-13, our asset management roadmap. Looking for a mover and a seconder. That report T 2020-13 regarding asset management roadmap we received, and the Council of the Township of Hamblin acts as follows. 1, Council directs staff to apply for a grant opportunity from the Federation of Canadian Municipalities Municipal Asset Management Program for asset management data and reporting advancement in Township of Hamilton. 2, Township of Hamilton commits to conducting the following activities in its proposed project submitted to the Federation of Canadian Municipalities Municipal Asset Management Program to advance its asset management program: life cycle and risk framework development, levels of service framework development, asset management training. And 3, that the Township of Hamilton commits up to $12,700 from its existing approved budget toward the cost of this initiative.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you.
I'll second the motion, Bill.
Thank you. Any discussion? Any input, Arthur, that we need to be aware of?
Through Mayor Kane, no further input other than the amount that we're putting forward will be a proportion of the total amount spent. So in other words, we're trying to get the money from FCM to support this initiative.
That's from our existing budget, obviously. So no more questions. Call the vote. Scott?
Sorry, I was
Sorry,
trying to get your attention.
Mr. Hand. Go ahead.
On this asset management, where do we sit currently? Are we at any point at all? I mean, this has been going on for quite some time.
To you, Mr. Mayor, we have done quite a few work We have done the state of maturity review, which identifies how well the township is managing its assets. We have been trained on how to collect data, how to do conditional assessment. As you are aware of the fact that finance department had a significantly high turnover last year. So we are carrying forward some of the projects in 2020. This year now we are collecting more data and also doing conditional analysis. Based on that information, we will start doing life cycle analysis.
And the GIS system will really benefit this asset management, won't it? Is that correct?
Through Mayor Kane to Councilor Williamson, there will be components of the JS program that will help us inform it. So in other words, road condition assets that are identified there, that will be supporting part of the asset management program.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions or input? Call the vote then. Scott,
Yay.
Pat,
Yay.
Mark,
Yay.
Larry,
Yay.
Bill is yay. Motion's carried. Section 13, emergency services, no reports. Section 14, we have communications and announcements, 14.1 through 14.4. Can we have a motion to get them on the floor, and then we'll pull anything that's of interest to members of council? So a mover and a seconder, that communications listed as 14.1 through 14.4 be received for information.
Scott will move.
Thank you. Larry will second. All in favor? Scott,
Yay.
Pat,
Yay.
Mark,
Yay.
Larry,
Yay.
Bill is also yay. Motion's carried. Anyone want to draw anything?
Yeah.
14.12. Yes, Mark?
I would, Bill, I'd like to support 14.2, 3, and 4. I think they all pertain to us. I see the Northumberland County supported the one, and I think they're all legitimate ones to support at this point.
Okay, do we need to discuss them individually, Mark?
I don't
No.
think so. They're kind of self-explanatory. I mean, they're from each municipality there, so
Yeah, I had 14.3 down as well to try and support. Anyone else? Any other input?
Sorry.
Go ahead,
I was wondering first, could Kate scroll down one to 14.2 because I'm trying to recall what it is.
Essential,
Oh, okay.
essential workers day.
Okay, that one's fine. My only question was actually on 14.3. The resolution says that we're supporting, I think, South Perth,
Yes.
like in our resolution, but South Perth doesn't say anything except that it's supporting somebody else. So I have no problem with the support, but I'm not sure that our resolution would be clear as to what we're actually supporting.
Somewhere it says who the
West
original.
Nipissing. Okay,
Yes. So we'll make sure that when we put this down, we're supporting the West Nipissing.
thank you. That's my only comments.
That's fine. Anyone else?
Just clarifying, we are supporting 14.4 also, the Orangeville? I think
That's my understanding.
yeah, 2, 3,
Oh,
3, and 4.
good. Thank you.
Okay, I'll call the vote then. Scott,
Yay.
Pat,
Yay.
Mark,
Yay.
Larry,
Yay.
Bill is yay. Motion's carried. To support 14.2, 3, and 4. Bylaws, none. Notice of motions, none. Media questions and agenda items, I don't believe we can do. We have no closed section. List of next regular council meetings listed for our consideration. And we are considering a committee of adjustment in July. Can we discuss that at all? With a format. I don't know if this is Sandra, Scott, or Arthur that I'm looking to. I have some ideas, I guess, of my own. Are we thinking about this being a complete Zoom meeting?
If I may speak to that.
Yes.
So the 14.1 was a letter from Minister Clark.
Yes.
So they're lifting that timeframe suspension from Planning Act requirements, and because they're wanting the province to be moving forward with being able to get building projects moving. So if they require a minor variance or a consent application for new development, they're wanting to move forward with that and encouraging municipalities to move forward, but to use virtual meetings. That was part of the letter that that was in 14.1. So I've just kind of put that on the agenda for council to think about a little bit. I don't know whether any members of council have thought at all about a Planning Act meeting virtually. I know that a couple of municipalities have tried that.
I was wondering if there was any way we could make a sort of a combination. I believe that it would be beneficial if our clerk and our board chairman and our planning coordinator were actually in council chamber as a threesome. The rest of the committee could be on Zoom. And with the new regulation of up to 10 people, that would give the opportunity, even if it was by appointment only or by lining up or whatever, but it would actually give the opportunity for, you know, a live meeting. I know that's out there.
I think that's going to need to be discussed maybe at corporate next
Yes.
month. But
Yes.
my biggest concern with that part of the suggestion, Bill, is I've heard from people like Scott Noble and that Zoom doesn't work at the office.
Why on earth not? Because of our internet?
Yeah.
We to support Deputy Mayor Jibb's comment through Mayor Kane, we have had some problems of operating Zoom through the township when we were running an all-staff meeting. So that is a comment that we would have to investigate further whether in fact could be made to work. To your comment though, Mayor Kane, we were wondering if we do have a meeting, the minister's letters encourage us to continue to have support to hold the meetings electronically. I realize you're trying to set up some scenario that might work with a mixture. At a minimum, if we set up a Zoom meeting with some sort of qualifications on it, so we don't have people trying to hijack the meeting that we've seen in some communities, we would try and hold an open public meeting, meet the requirements of the Planning Act, and be able to deal with the application. So we'll put together some information to make it run in the most effective fashion and bring that back so council and committee of adjustment is aware of how we would proceed to execute on that.
My worry about it is how many residents we would have who could not participate through Zoom based on their internet service and their technology that they have in their homes and the ability they have with technology.
I have concerns about that too. And I've been mulling over how to put my notices out advising that it would be a virtual meeting. And if you want to participate, let me know and we'll tell you how to connect. But also giving the option that if you as one of the neighbors object to a virtual meeting for whatever number of reasons, they should be able to put that objection forward. And I think that objection should be definitely taken to heart by committee or council as the case may be, because if we exclude somebody, we haven't done a proper public meeting. And I don't want to see something like that happen, somebody be excluded because they are not technically savvy or they've got internet problems or whatever. I'd like to be able to say, if you have a problem with it, if you have a formal objection, let me know beforehand and we will defer the meeting until a later date. To me, that's fair. Now, it's fair to the public. Is it fair to the applicant? You know, we've got a juggling situation here.
Yes, Larry.
Can I ask a question? Why are we not getting internet service at the township offices? I mean, come on, it's 2020.
I'm not sure how relevant that is, because the other side of it is that people who want to join don't have internet service.
No,
So
but I think
yes, we want it fixed at the township office. I'm not disagreeing with that, but it could be working at our end and not reaching the people that it needs to reach. So it's,
No,
that's only part of the problem.
Yeah, but that's not the case. I think what we also are looking at is having a few members of the chair and a few members of staff, but allow the public to go to the township offices to conduct the committee of adjustment, not do it virtually totally. So council members can get online, but the public, we have to hold it as a public meeting. So in order to do that, we have to have internet service that's working, right? I don't understand why we can't get the township offices to work on the internet.
So if I can, through Mayor Kane to Councilor Williamson, we have internet at the office. It is working. It works very well. We just found that in some Zoom meetings we held, for some reason, people were stalling or stuttering, if that, that staccato kind of overtake. So for some reason, when we had the actual Zoom meeting, that was a problem. It didn't happen on MS Teams, but it was for some reason, the connection, the number of people connecting through Zoom, through our servers, created that kind of pause and staccato. So it made the meeting a little more difficult. But we have internet. We have used it on different capacities, different tools, different techniques like MS Teams. And it was only that instance when we had a larger meeting with everyone on going through our servers that we found it created a hesitation or a problem with the actual conduct of hearing people speak. So we could test it again to see where we're at, to see if some of the upgrades that we've made more recently with licenses, if that would have an impact or not. And that's all I can do is report back that we'll pursue that as well.
So,
Go ahead, Mark.
if I could, can we maybe look at, instead of having it at the township office, maybe have it at a place like the Baltimore Arena, somewhere where we could spread people out and perhaps have it as a public meeting rather than have it in this virtual state? Because there's a lot of people out there that don't even have computers, let alone trying to communicate. So I'd be much more, for me, I'd like to see it at the Baltimore Arena, and we could spread us out and spread out the public also, and have maybe and make sure the microphones are working good there.
The only problem is, Mark, if I could, is that you can only have 10 people within the room. So we'd have to, I mean, that's a good suggestion, I think, but there may be, the only reason that we originally looked at just having a few members of the chair and a few members of staff and have the rest of council online. Is that correct?
But I think you could spread out each application to only have so many in the room at a time, right? Or just allow so many in at a time.
That sounds good.
But by having 4 of us not there, that opens up 4 more places for members of the public. That's what I was thinking.
Yeah. I say we move it back to the chair and see what he comes up with.
I think it's a staff resolution that we need here, people.
So perhaps staff can take this back. I'm getting kind of the feeling that council would like to move forward with some of the Planning Act applications. We just, as staff, we just have to look into a couple of process options for council to see what works best for council, but gives us that opportunity to have the public in for the applications and still maintain the province's restriction of a gathering of 10.
May I ask a question?
Go ahead.
So my question is about timing. If we now are waiting till staff comes back with a report in July, the earliest we could have a meeting is August, and like a public meeting would be August, and anything decided there has a waiting period before anything can move forward. So are we making it so that people actually can't even look at doing their building or variances until September, October? Have I got the timing right?
Hope not.
You're getting there. If we go forward with August meetings, it will be September before a building permit is available.
And that will cover the waiting period as well for things like a minor variance?
Yes.
Okay, I just, that, I don't know what other options we have, but it does concern me a little that the people are not even able to look at starting to build till September.
Yeah, so the August meeting, I would presume would still be the second Tuesday, the 11th, plus 20 days for minor variance would be the end of business on the 31st. So September 1st, a building permit, September 1st, September 2nd, a building permit would be available. That's the quickest. If we're going to go forward with public meetings in July, I need to know right now. I mean, right now, because I've got notices I have to prepare and circulation lists I have to prepare and get everything out in the next few days, because I've been told that mail is even slower, so I can't wait until the end of 10 days before the meeting to send out everything. So if we're going to go forward with July, please decide. If we want another report, I'm okay with that. But I have
The logistics in place, Sandra, for July. It's going to take longer than that.
I believe so.
Yeah.
I mean,
How back
I
then?
Your timelines are restricting us too much.
yes, I have had discussions with the clerk, and I know that we have been considering the possibility of a zoning amendment meetings in July, and I'm gearing myself up for that, and I can get that ready to go because I've got a lot of background done on that. If this is the way council wishes to proceed, committee of adjustment, yeah, the logistics are not favorable for me.
Sandra, how many committee of adjustment applications might we have on file right now to process?
Right now, 2 or 3, but if I get the go ahead, it might be half a dozen or more, because I think people are waiting on things. Well, I put my application in if it's just going to sit there, because that's what I've had to tell people for the last 3 months. You're welcome to submit, but I'm not doing anything with it.
So then the question also comes up, if you all of a sudden get deluged, like all at the same time, how do we do a cutoff for people who've already been waiting, not putting their application in because they knew that it wasn't going anywhere? Are we going to consider like even extending the meetings or the number of applications we take?
Yeah, yeah. Good questions. The questions that committee is going to have to answer. I do want to point out that the Planning Act says when a complete application for minor variance is received, it's supposed to have a decision within 30 days. So variances are going to take top priority. Application for consent, I believe, can have 60 days before decision, and zoning, I believe, is 90 days. So, you know, if this did happen, I could put all the variances through 1 month, then all the consents through the next month with 2 more variances, and then all the zonings the 3rd month with 1 or 2 more other things. But again, there's a lot of juggling and logistic questions to be answered.
Mayor Kane?
Yes, go ahead.
So Sandra and I have been preparing for moving forward. So she's had applications sitting there that were going to be scheduled for April. She received an application that was going to be scheduled for May. So those are the ones that has already drafted all the reports for them and has prepared everything so that when we got that go ahead to have a meeting, that at least we could move forward with the backlog first and have council deal with those, and then try to get back into the normal routine of receiving applications and processing them.
I mean, I'm for moving ahead as fast as we can, but maybe you should include Scott as chair in your deliberations and your plannings and see, you know, what just come back to us, give us, I don't believe we have to wait another month for a council meeting. You know, you can make the decision and communicate through emails.
We have one zoning bylaw application that has been, we've been waiting to deal with it, and I would like to bring that zoning bylaw application forward for the July meeting. That would be the only one under the Planning Act. We would have a pre-registration so that we know that the applicant would pre-register. A notification would go out that anybody that wants to participate in the meeting, this is how you participate.
Sure.
And move that one forward. And that particular zoning application was related to a minor variance that council dealt with in March. Made some changes to it and approved it so that the applicant could at least proceed with some things.
Yes, let's try and do it.
That's our Dale Road property, right, Kate?
Yes.
That's correct. And then, yes, I think the chair, Chairman Gibb for the Committee of Adjustment, perhaps if we could work with you and Sandra and come up with a process that we feel would be appropriate for the public and for the decision makers.
Kate, the other two applications that you spoke of, April, May timeframe, are they rezonings or are they Committee of Adjustment works?
Their Committee of Adjustment.
Okay. Variances or severances?
I believe there were 3 variances and a severance. Sandra, you could.
I've got 1 variance and 4 consent applications. I just looked it up.
Okay. Well, if I were to have any input, I'd start us off with saying we got to keep it simple and concise.
Right. Thank you.
Anyone else with any input?
Bill, maybe we have to, I still, to get the public input on this, it's going to be very difficult unless you allow public to come into the building and we're there. So, I mean, I don't see why the public can't come to the building, and we do a lot like what's happening in downtown businesses where you only allow a person, you know, they come in for that application and somebody will have to be outside to allow that person to come in as one comes out. I know it'll be a slow and onerous process, but if there's only 1 or 2 applications, maybe that's what we'll have to do. And at least you'll be able to hear everybody and, you know, we can make our decision from that. And at least everybody has their say. Because I don't feel comfortable in allowing this virtual. I just think that's just a disastrous thing. I think somebody will come up with a complaint after we make decisions and weren't able to be heard. So.
Agree.
I just think staff need to look at that anyway and see if that'll work or not.
Well, let's let Kate, Scott, and Sandra kick around, come up with some. There's anyone that has any input, you can email them with ideas, and hopefully they can come up with something in short term.
I think we can. So thank you for that. Yeah, input.
All right, so we'll leave it then to that group and with Arthur as well, obviously. That brings us to section 20, confirmatory bylaw. Mover and a seconder, the bylaw 2020-36, being a bylaw to adopt proceedings of the meeting and to authorize its execution, be given first, second, third reading, finally passed the 16th day of June 2020. Mover, Larry. Seconder.
I'll
Mark.
second.
I got Mark, thank you. All in favor, Scott?
Yay.
Pat?
Yay.
Mark?
Yay.
Larry?
Yay.
Bill is yay. Motion's passed. Motion to adjourn at 3:03 I have on my clock. Moved by Scott, seconded by Larry, that the regular council meeting of June 14th be adjourned at 3:03. All in favor, Scott?
Yay.
Pat?
Yay.
Mark?
Yay.
Larry?
Yes.
Bill is a yay. Motion to adjourn is carried. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Have a good
Well,
day.
we might do another one. Stay
Stay
safe.
well.